Good morning, everybody, and welcome again to the study of the Torah portion, the weekly Torah portion. We're studying from the book Selections from Likutei Sichos and Vayikra, the first one. Just a very short introduction. The Torah, the entire book of Leviticus in Hebrew is called Vayikra. The word Vayikra means, and he called. Vayikra el Moshe. The third word is Moshe. God is calling Moshe to command them about the sacrifices. It doesn't say Vayikra el Moshe about the Ten Commandments. It doesn't say Vayikra el Moshe about building of the Mishkan. It says Vaydaber, Vayomer, he spoke, he said. Here, the introduction to the entire book is about calling Moshe. And the rabbis address this. We are going to be concentrating on another part of the word Vayikra. The word Vayikra is made out of 5 letters: Vav, Yud, Kuf, Resh, Aleph, A. I'm sorry, Aleph. The last letter, Aleph, appears in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, in a small, minor letter. It's called minor, which calls attention because the Torah is written in a normal text. If you write a Torah, if you're a scribe, or if you read from the Torah and it's a kosher Torah, you always find the Aleph smaller. And this is a question that a child later becoming a rabbi is asking of his grandfather. The Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, Menachem Mendel, the third Chabad Rebbe, was raised by his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya and Shulchan Aruch, because his mother, this child's mother, the daughter of the Rebbe, had passed at a young age as a sacrifice for the Hasidim. And therefore, the grandfather, her father, took upon himself to raise the child because the father was a very holy man, but the child needed caring. And the grandfather was the one who took care of him. Later, he became the Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe is son after son from this Rebbe, and he's named after him. And here is when he's a child, he's asking a question. Similarly, it's a simple question a child is asking, but we will see how the Rebbe turned it upside down to show us that when a Rebbe is speaking, even a child, it is a very impactful teaching for the rest of our life. I'm going to read the beginning, and then I'm going to summarize points so that we can stay concentrated. At a Pesach Verbringen, actually in 1941, the Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, related the manner in which the Alter Rebbe brought his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, to Cheder for the first time. Among the points the Rebbe Rayatz mentioned is that the Alter Rebbe instructed the teacher to study the first passage of Parshas Vayikra with the child. After the teacher had studied the passage with the child asked the Alter Rebbe, why is the Aleph of the word Vayikra small? The Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Rebbe at a Pesach Verbringen, is sharing that the Alter Rebbe took his grandson, whom he cared for like his own son, to a teacher. He was probably 3 or 4 years old. And he told the teacher, when you show him words of Torah, teach him Aleph Bet, make sure you start teaching him from Vayikra, not Bereshit, not Shmot, not the Ten Commandments, not the Shema, but Vayikra. It is well known that children, when I was a child, after I recognized the letters, I studied the first verse of Vayikra. When I do the optionish, cutting the hair for my children, I show them Aleph Bet chart, ask them to read the Aleph Bet, and I show them the first verse of Vayikra, asking them to read. I read with them word by word the first verse, which we're not going to discuss why. The Alter Rebbe, so the Tzemach Tzedek, a child, is asking the grandfather why the Aleph is small. He's very curious and something is abnormal. The Alter Rebbe entered a state of deveikut for quite some time. Afterwards, he replied. The Rebbe closed his eyes and concentrated deeply, and then he shared the following. Adam, the first man, was God's handiwork, and God testified that his wisdom surpassed that of the ministering angels. However, Adam knew his own greatness and consequently became overimpressed. As a result of this awareness, therefore, he lapsed and committed the sin of the tree of knowledge. And the Rebbe continues, Moshe, our teacher, also knew his own greatness. However, not only did Moshe not become overimpressed as a result of his awareness, it caused them to have a broken and contrite heart, making him appear very lowly in his own eyes. He thought, well, add another person who was not Amram's son, nor the seventh generation in descent from Abraham, to have been granted such great, lofty soul and such ancestral merit, that person would have certainly accomplished more than that. And the Holy One, blessed be He, states in the Torah, the man, Moshe, was exceedingly humble, more than any person on the face of the earth. No matter how low a person's stature and how simple he was, Moshe would measure himself against them, thinking that if that person had possessed these positive spiritual qualities with which he, Moshe, has been endowed, that is qualities that he had not earned through his own work, as well as his ancestral merit, that person would certainly have been better than he. There are three types. Okay, so let's stop right here, even though the Rebbe continue. What the Rebbe, the grandfather said to him, suddenly he started thinking about comparing Adam to Moshe. He says that Adam was the own handcraft of God's creation. The body was created by God, as opposed to us. We're created with God's help, but it's human creation. Not so Adam. Yet he knew his talent, his qualities, that he surpassed that of the angels, and therefore it brought him into sin. Haughtiness leads to sin. Moshe, on the other hand, the Torah testifies he was more humble than any other man. In what way was he humble? He knew his great qualities. He knew that he was endowed as a gift with a special soul. He knew that he was a seventh generation to Abraham, which is very unique. And therefore he said to himself, if somebody else would have those qualities, I'm sure he would reach much farther and much closer to God. This is the Alter Rebbe explaining to his grandson. And he concludes, in the Tmunus, I'm sorry, in English, there are three types of forms for the letters which the Holy One, blessed be He, gave at Mount Sinai. Oversized letters, average-sized letters, and miniature letters. Generally, the Torah is written in average-sized Beinonim letters, for the intent is that a person should be a Beinoni, an intermediate. Through the Torah, one teacher reaches the level of a Beinoni. With regard to Adam, the first man, whose recognition of his own greatness caused him to lapse and commit the sin of the tree of knowledge, and oversized Aleph is used with regards to oversized Aleph is used. With regards to Moshe, our teacher, those whose divine service of recognizing his own humbleness brought him to the highest level of humility, Vayikra is written with a miniature Aleph. So now the Alter Rebbe concludes his teaching to the grandchild. He says, Adam, who was so great in his own eye for a good reason, he did not over-exaggerate his greatness. He was God's creation, God's handyman's own creation. It brought him to sin that pushed him farther from God. Therefore, in Divrei Hayamim, in the book of Chronicles, the book of Divrei Hayamim, it's a book in the 24 holy books, scripture. It says, Ele Divrei Adam. These are the chronicles of men. The word Adam is the name of Adam, the first man. The Aleph is a huge. Moshe, when God calls Moshe, the beginning of a new book, he calls it with an Aleph that's miniature. Why? You have three levels of letters in the Torah. Majority, 99%, are average-sized letters. Because Beinoni, it's the middle. The Torah, through the study of Torah, became Beinoni. Adam rose to become great in his own eyes and about sin. That's why the first Aleph in the book of Chronicles, the first letter of his name is with a large Aleph. Here, when God calls Moshe, he uses a miniature Aleph. because this miniature Aleph representing his humility, how humble he was in front of every human being. He did know his greatness. He did know all that is possessed, but he knew that it was endowed upon him without his efforts. And therefore, he said, if somebody else would have been possessing the same, he would reach much farther. So far, so good. You understand everything? Yeah. By the way, there are many other places in the Torah that the great letter appear. And I want to share an example. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is our Lord, God is one. The word Daled in Shema Yisrael is a large one. There are many places where, there are a few other places where a large Aleph appears or a large letter appears or a small letter, but that's not the topic of our discussion. The Rebbe is asking few questions. I'm going to divide them into two, but the second one has many details. The first question, on the surface, there is a point in this story which requires clarification. Why was it necessary for the Alter Rebbe to elaborate regarding the description of Adam, the first man, and the reason why an oversized Aleph is used in his name? And furthermore, to mention it before answering the question regarding Moshe, the use of an oversized Aleph with regards to Adam appears irrelevant to clarifying why miniature Aleph is used in the word Vayikra. Similarly, it is sufficient to say that the miniature Aleph in Vayikra is an allusion to Moshe's great humility. There is asking a simple question. He's asking you why a small Aleph, right? Why are you going to talk about a large Aleph? Who is asking about the large Aleph? How about addressing the question first, answering it, and then you can talk about someone else's that compared to Moshe was different and he had a big Aleph. In addition to the fact that you do not speak about, he didn't ask you that. That's the first question. The Rebbe is asking that many commentators address this same question, and that's the way they answer. The small Aleph is their commentators on the Torah ask, why there is a small Aleph? Because Moshe was very humble in his eyes. As the Torah testifies, Moshe was the most humble man that ever created, and therefore, that should be enough to teach a child. That's the second question. So the first question is, why do you have to bring Adam's story to the discussion? Second question is, why address saying that Moshe compared himself to everybody else, knowing that he did not achieve it on his own? Just say Moshe was very humble in his eyes, as the Torah testifies. Therefore, the Aleph is there to signify that Moshe was very humble. The Rebbe is saying that in this there are two details that need to be clarified. That's the third part. The Rebbe is asking, where does the Alter Rebbe got that Moshe knew his great qualities, but said to himself, I compare to others and they can do better? Where is it coming from? The Torah only testified that Moshe was the most humble man. Say the small Aleph is the most, because he's a very humble man. But the Alter Rebbe says, no, he knew his great talents, but he says he did not earn it on his own service of God, but he was endowed from God or from being a seventh generation, so he had a special neshama. Where is it coming from? And finally, why does the Alter Rebbe, that he compared himself to all other human beings, saying that if they would have been endowed with those gifts, they would have done better? You can say that he was very humble, and he was humble before every human being. Why do you have to say the comparison? As I said, the first part was the source, and second, why do you need to bring it up? Did you understand the questions? Again, very briefly, the first is the Alter Rebbe, to address the question, says to him that Adam had a large Aleph in his name, and because he was very haughty, and that caused him to sin. Moshe was the most humble man from all men, as the Torah testifies. How was he able to be humble? He knew, the Rebbe says, he knew his talents, but he said that this was not something he earned with his own sweat and tears, but rather he was endowed as a gift. And therefore, if somebody else would have the same, that person would have achieved even farther than when he would get closer to God. And the Rebbe is asking, if you ask a question, why did you address Adam? Why do you bring up Adam to the story? B, if you explain Moshe, just say, like other commentators explain, Moshe was very humble. Why do you have to compare him to other humans? And then where is the source for it? And in addition, why does Moshe, well, why do you say that he compared himself to others? You can say that a person is humble. A person can be humble without comparing himself to other people. Here is the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe's answer to me is a mind-blowing. The Rebbe says that when you read this text or anywhere else where you see that Adam had a large Aleph and caused them to sin and be pushed away from God, does not make sense on the simple surface. Why? Because the Torah tells us that when you have large letters, it means a sign of greatness. Because the Talmud tells us that, is the Rebbe says, a little child knows, if there is a big letter, it's a big person, an important person. So if Adam appears with Aleph in the book of Chronicles that's large, it's not because that it caused Adam to sin. That's not possible to say. Otherwise, in addition to the fact that the Torah will not mention disrespectful opposite of a compliment about a human being, it just does not make sense, because any large letter is out of the ordinary, extraordinary. That's why, says the Rebbe, in addition, the Rebbe points out two points that are technical, but I'm going to show them anyway. One, in Likutei Torah, in the Rebbe's book of commentary on the discourses on the Torah portion, the Alter Rebbe writes that Adam was one of the greatest humans ever existed because God created and formed his body, and that's why he has a big Aleph. In other words, the Alter Rebbe, if you say it's not a complimentary comment, he contradicts himself. Number two, says the Rebbe, the way the Alter Rebbe says Adam had after he sinned, the Rebbe says like that, even after Adam sinned with eating from the tree of knowledge, the large Aleph appears in his name. If you tell me that it's the derogatory, it's not complimentary, you should say Adam has a big Aleph that caused him to sin. But it doesn't say that. In other words, the book of Chronicles, the way I understand, the book of Chronicles is way after the sin, chronicling his life. Yet the Aleph, the large Aleph, meaning he was a great man, appears there after his sin in the tree of knowledge. He's still a great man, and not something that happened that caused him to sin. Therefore, this says the Rebbe, the following, the Alter Rebbe, when he answered the Tzemach Tzedek, I'm reading now in number 5. The Alter Rebbe, when he was answering his grandson, he wants to properly educate him, and not just answering the question. That's why he's bringing Adam to the story, because he wants to show him how a person should conduct himself. God forbid to say that Adam's sin and the greatness that he was created by God caused him to sin. That's not correct, says the Rebbe, and that's the way the Rebbe sees it, which I wish we can adapt. Every human being has a nitzotz, a spark of Adam, and nitzotz of Moshe. Adam and Moshe teach us two components that complete each other and complement each other, and together create a perfect human being. Adam is teaching us that you must know your talents and your qualities. The only difference between the Adam, the original, and us, the offsprings of Adam, is by Adam he was perfect in his body and soul, because the body was formed from the soil by God himself. So his body was perfect. Our entity, our existence is perfect, straight created by God, referring to the neshama, the soul, not the body. But the neshama is just like Adam, very close to God and very special. Adam, says the Rebbe, knew his greatness. He knew he was created by God. He knew he's above angels. He knew that there is no one else that is close to God like he was. That's something that we as human beings need to possess, knowing that we are very special. In addition, says the Rebbe, the Adam, even after he sinned, even after he went away from God, he is still the greatest creature and close to God. He is the level of a tzaddik because this body was great. That's what the Alter Rebbe is telling his grandson. After he sinned, because he knew his greatness and talent, it caused him to sin, but he's still the greatest. And the Aleph appears after the sin, meaning for us, our neshama, which is possessed a part of Adam, we are so special that we are a tzaddik, meaning it can never go away from God. It can never be separated and pushed away from God, even after we sin. In other words, that's the first lesson I learned. Even if someone says, I don't believe it, or I don't keep kosher, it does not touch the neshama, it touches the body. The body can be defiled. Or those who study Tanya, the garments, which is machshava dibur u'maaseh, thought, speech, and action. But the actual neshama is pure. Neshama shenatata bi tehora here. It's pure. It was created by God, and therefore it can never be tainted. It can never be damaged. It can never be affected. That's the aspect that Adam is bringing to us. So even after that's for the garments, not for the snow. Even it's all about the garments. Even after we have Adam has seen, the book of Chronicle tells us Adam with a large Aleph. You know why? It's complementary. He was a very special human being. He was unique from all other beings and future human beings because his body was created by Adam. Safe trip. Says the Rebbe, because everything God created is eternal, and Adam was created by God. Therefore, his greatness is eternal. When God created my neshama, it's eternal. I'm always in the level of a tzaddik. What the Rebbe is saying is that when you have a Baal Teshuvah, someone who repent, I am a Baal Teshuvah. I don't know about everybody here, but everybody should strive to become a Baal Teshuvah, to return back to God. It's all about the garments and it's all about the body. But the neshama representing Adam is God's eternal creation, and it will never, never be tainted. It's always the level of a tzaddik. That's the first point. And again, that's why even after the sin, the Aleph by Adam is large, not to the derogatory, to speak bad about them, but quite the opposite, to compliment them, to show that no matter how far he went, because he knew his greatness, he did not pushed away from God. So when a human being, a Jew, is sinning, it's just like Adam. On one hand, we need to know our greatness. On the other hand, we need to realize that even after sin, the neshama is a tzaddik, the neshama is untainted, and is perfect, and is still close to God. Now let's talk about Moshe. Moshe will compliment Adam to cause us not to sin. Number 7, I'm reading text number 12, page number 12. I'm reading before on page 13 what I just said. Therefore, every Jew, regardless of his current situation, possesses a reflection of the level of Adam as he existed before the sin. The difference is that with regards to Adam, these virtues were also manifest from a standpoint of his body, for his body was also God's handiwork. For all others, these virtues are manifest in a revealed manner only from the standpoint of their souls, which are an actual part of God from above. For this reason, a soul has no connection to sin, as the Zohar comments on the verse, if a soul sins, stating, the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, asked in wonderment, how could a soul sin? Even if a Jew stumbles in sin, heaven forbid, his soul remains faithful to him even at the time of sin. While he sins, the soul has nothing to do with sin. The soul is connected to God. Therefore, that's why he was saying, in this is the inner meaning of the verse. You people are all tzaddikim, since there is a dimension of Adam as he existed before the sin within every Jew. Each Jew's divine service parallels that of tzaddikim, despite the fact that he may previously have been involved in the direct opposite of that service. When a Jew observes the Torah and its mitzvot as an expression of the inner dimension of his soul, the attributes of Adam within him, he is not returning to God in teshuvah. He is not one who was distant, but who was drawn close. Instead, his divine service resembles that of a tzaddik, whose conduct was always virtuous, never having any connection to evil and sin. Because there is the dimension of a tzaddik within the human, the Jew, which is the neshama. Therefore, we all are tzaddikim, even at the time of sin. That's why there's always wondering, how is it possible for a soul to sin? Therefore, there has to be an acknowledgement of my virtues. We need to know who we are, what we possess, the gift that God gave us, just like Adam before sin. Now, number 8, page 15. At the same time, caution is necessary. The awareness of one's positive qualities must be coupled with the awareness of one's fundamental humbleness. Otherwise, the recognition of one's positive qualities can cause one to descend and lapse into haughtiness that could lead to sin. And that's why the Rebbe made sure to explain to him. Now we can understand why Moshe had a small Aleph. I'm reading number 9, page 15. On this basis, we can also understand why the Alter Rebbe elaborated when explaining Moshe's humility. Not only did he explain that Moshe was humble because he recognized that his positive qualities has been endowed from above, but the Alter Rebbe emphasized that Moshe compared himself to others. He thought that if another person had been granted these positive qualities, he would have certainly been better than him. This is, says the Rebbe, necessary because a person granted such lofty qualities must take precautions, since he adopts a stance that reflects the power that stems from holiness and involves the recognition of his positive qualities, that it is possible that Yeshut is self-centeredness, will arise. Hence, the ordinary recognition of his own humbleness is not sufficient. Instead, he must go to the opposite extreme and manifest absolute humility and self-nullification, bitul. And the Rebbe is going to explain how. In other words, if you self-centered and you recognize your qualities, that you have a soul that's created by God and never can be tainted, and therefore I'm a tzaddik throughout my life, it can cause someone, God forbid, to misbehave. Therefore, it's not enough to be humble and say, oh, I have to be humble, but we have to compare ourselves to others. And that unique comparison, says the Rebbe, will put us at bay. Genuine humility is demonstrated not only by seeking to emphasize one's own nothingness and insignificance, but also by seeking to highlight the positive qualities which another person possesses. You know how you can truly humble yourself? Like Moshe, where you compare yourself to others, says the Rebbe. We see this in actual fact. There are people who are able to bring about bitul, to be nullified and humble within themselves. Moreover, they can even bear to hear another person reduce their ego to nothingness. Even so, it is possible for the thought to enter the mind, it's true, I am nothing, but the other person is even more of a nothing than I am. So yeah, there are people who say, yeah, I'm a nothing, I'm nobody, but you're twice as nothing as I am. Why are you laughing? I thought you would say, wow, I never thought of it.
Every morning.
Every morning? Wow.
When people achieve very high status, even today, we really have to be very careful.
Of course, we all do. And says the Rebbe, you need to be humble. Now, there is a simple humility where I feel I'm nothing. The problem is, if I compare myself to you, I'll say, yes, I'm nothing. But you don't even begin. Your voice is nothing. Yeah, I don't know if I showed you that the previous Rebbe in his memoirs writes a story that I think that he experienced. On Simchat Torah, he came to a synagogue of Misnagdim, and the humbles, the people who are very humble, are very revered there. So they honor on Simchat Torah, hakafa, the dancing with the Torah of all the humble people in the synagogue. And people who jump in and a fight ensued because some people say, I'm more humble than you. And you're not a humble man. They had a big fight about who is more humble than the other. Says the Rebbe, true humility is when you compare, remember that. True humility is when you compare your humility with another person. If I'm humble in my own eyes, that's easy. We call it talk is cheap. And the test is that if you say yourself, I'm very humble, compare yourself to someone else and say, are they as humble as I am? And I'm sure you'd say to yourself, I'm sure they are not. And if they say they are humble, they are much, much less humble than I am. But, says the Rebbe, to bring himself to the level that he thinks about himself as nothing and views the other person as important requires a very different approach to divine service. One that demands a great and loftier degree of bitul.
Last week's Tanya.
I call it qualitative difference. In other words, your humility is not about what you think about yourself. True humility is what you think about someone else. How do you consider another person? Are they great? Are they special? Are they better than me? That's how you measure humility. Not compare being humble to yourself. Compare it to your spouse, to your family, to your partners. Says the Rebbe, here as well, we see the great humility of Moshe, who rectified the sin of the tree of knowledge, as was well known that when Moshe received the Torah at Sinai, the contamination from the sin of the tree of knowledge ceased. Not only was Moshe humble, he was the direct opposition to Yeshut, to existence, exceedingly humble, more than any person of the face of the earth. He compared himself with every Jew, in doing so, coming to respect them, thinking that he had that person had that person been given his positive qualities, he would certainly have been better than him. That explains another part. The rabbi, by the way, I skipped many other parts, but here is another part. Adam in sin caused God to depart from the earth into the sky. Anybody who studied a little Torah, you know that God had departed 7 heavens. There were 7 heavens, and then Abraham brought it from 7 to 6. Yitzchak, and there are 7. Moshe is the 7th generation. Huh?
Aren't there only 4 now? 4 heavens?
No, 7 heavens.
Okay.
7 heavens.
All right.
So earth to the first, all the way to the 7th heaven. Abraham brought it from 7 to the 6, Yitzchak to the 5th, Yaakov to the 4th, Yosef to the 3rd. It goes on. Moshe is the 7th generation from Abraham. He brought, it's been told in the, by the way, it's Medrash, not Kabbalah, that Moshe brought God into earth. Where do we see that? At Mount Sinai. Because of Moshe, God came down on Mount Sinai. In other words, the sin, the ailment, the disease that made Adam sin is self-recognition of my greatness, my great talent, and taking it to become haughty. And therefore it caused him sin. Even after sin, he's still the same. He's close to God. He's a large Aleph. Moshe, on the other hand, to prevent himself, he needed to acknowledge that he's very special. He needed to acknowledge that he's unique from all other men that exist. There is no other human that exists like Moshe. However, that's why the Alter Rebbe says Moshe knew his great talent. However, he felt that it was endowed on him without his effort. Because God gave him a soul, he chose him. Because he's a 7th generation. By doing so, that's not enough to be humble, realizing that it's not my effort, but it's a gift. That's not enough, because that can cause sin, just like Adam. He knew and acknowledged his greatness, that can cause him to sin. What does Moshe do? He says to himself, if you or any other simple man who don't even read Hebrew would be endowed with the same gifts that I was, he would have been able to be closer to God than I am. Therefore, he looked at every person with great humility. He learned to be humbled and to respect every human being, thinking of himself. So in other words, the key is that he knew this talent, he knew his greatness, but he did not achieve. He said to himself, I didn't achieve it on my own, I got it. If someone else would have it, you do be greater. When you compare yourself to others and be humble compared to others because they potentially can be much better, much greater than I am, that's true humility. Therefore, he removed the ailment that Adam created, and therefore God comes back to earth. Says the Rebbe, this is the lesson that we need to take. We need to know that on one hand, no matter how far we go from God, we are now just Adam before the sin. Because the neshama, the difference between Adam and us, Adam's body was connected to God. We, our soul, has a great Aleph. And number two, we need to know that we are very special. We are God's creation, and if it's God's creation, it's always perfect. The God's creation refers to the neshama. I possess the neshama no matter how far I go. If I am tainted with sin, it's only the garments and only the body, not my neshama. On the other hand, if I only possess or acknowledge my greatness, and that's the only thing that I have in mind, it can cause us to become haughty and disrespect others. Therefore, we need to know that if someone else would have been gifted with the same talents that God gave me, the set of parents, the choices I made, they must have been much, much closer to God, and therefore we learn to respect. So what is humility? True humility, Moshe teaches us, is not that you don't recognize your talents. You need to find your talents and be very proud of them and shout them and thank God and tell everybody how special you are. True humility is that you bond with every human being, realizing that another human being, potentially, if they had the same qualities, they would have reached much, much farther. And therefore, he might be not doing the right thing, and I do the right thing. It does not change the fact that if he had the same challenges and upbringing and background, he would have been making better choices. He would have been a lot closer to God. That's true humility. So again, humility is measured not by how I feel about myself. Humility is how I compare myself to other person, acknowledging that another person is great, even if at this point he sins and I don't. It doesn't make me better than that person, because if he had the same upbringing, the same background, the same IQ, he would have done a lot better than I do, and that's true humility. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe was trying to teach the young child who is becoming a Rebbe. He would be a very unique human being in his own right. He wrote many, many books, and he explained the Tanya in a very beautiful way, among others, teaching him that you need to have Adam and Moshe. You cannot just address the question, but you need to know that Adam was a great man because he's self-centered. He knew he's talented, which means his Aleph is very special, and we need to acknowledge our talents and our achievements and our greatness. At the same time, we need Moshe to humble ourselves. That's why the Torah begins, Vayikra el Moshe, when Hashem calls to Moshe, to give him the commandments about sacrifices, which is an aroma, pleasant aroma before God. It's only because Moshe was the most humble man from the face of the earth. How was he humble? He knew his talents, he knew his greatness, but he did not allow himself to feel above any other human being. And I hope this is a great lesson for this week. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.
Control that. Sure, I got the